So maybe you can explain to me what is patina?
Maybe we should get an official definition. But I think to me, patina is just the change and the wear that an item requires over the use of its life, I guess.
Well, when I was asking about patina, the difference between patina on leather and patina on copper, I've noticed in my mind when I think about patina on leather, it's two things to me. It's the way that the color changes, sort of like where the leather has rubbed up against something and how that has changed. Usually it changes a little bit darker and more rich in color, but also I see a change in luster on leather where it tends to become brighter depending on what the leather tannage is. And then when I think about something like copper or brass, I notice it gets a little bit green, like Statue of Liberty, fair degree, I think is the correct term. How would you describe the effect of patina on leather?
Yeah, I think that. So I think the patina, there's a big time component to it. So it doesn't. You start out with something that has no patina, and then you gain patina over time. So you're always going in one direction as soon as you've got something that's a finished product, because you've got, unless it's the product is existing in an area with no heat or temperature changes or sunlight or inputs of any kind, then it's going to change. It will change a little bit.
Like even the air, right, will change.
Right. Because patina is really just oxidation at the end of the day. Well, I guess mostly because if you're in small leather goods, that handling it, you're actually adding oils to it and dirt, and that's changing the color too. But there's a lot of color change that comes from UV and just the things oxidizing. Just it's like kind of like, think about it like rust, but it's not rust, I guess. Things are changing as they're breaking down on like a very granular level.
It's interesting to me that you say the air is the most impactful thing. Is that what you're saying? Or one of the most impactful things on patina for leather?
If you had to pick one thing, probably UV would be, sunlight would give you the most change. Not necessarily in terms of appearance, but just overall would change the leather the most. The biggest impact is handling it. If you're going to handle it and wear it, because we've got that covers a bunch of different inputs in terms of moisture and, like I said, the oils from your hands and dirt. And like I think that's the biggest change. And then depending on how it's being worn, I mean, the luster will change. I mean, if it's a pair of shoes, they can tend to get duller, and well, I guess over the toe, but they get duller. But maybe where your pants rub, it might get shinier or brighter. But a wallet's going to get brighter as long as it's a men's wallet,
it's or polishing pocket, in your pocket,
going in and out of your pocket. But if it's in like a purse or a bag, it might not get that polish going on. So, but it's all different. It's all patina. It's just which direction.
See, that's interesting. I wasn't thinking about patina in that way, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I think you're right. I was sort of only thinking about patina as like how I've imparted my style onto the leather by wearing it and using it, but I wasn't thinking about the air as much. If I want a patina and a dramatic development and change over time on my leather, what components would you say are necessary to be tanned inside of the leather or lack thereof?
Mostly you would associate a vegetable tanned or a vegetable retanned leather as one that would patina the most. But that's not to say that other leather doesn't patina. It's just maybe less dramatic or less sort of textbook, I guess. You think about a baseball glove, and that's a baseball, or at least our baseball glove leather is straight chrome, and that patinas a lot. But that's from
interesting.
That's from getting a lot of repetitive rubbing from a baseball and oiling, and it's on your hand and it gets sweat. So I mean that gets a really nice, shiny, darkened patina over time. So it's not the vegetable or the tree bark components are not required, but I think that they are, and we'd have to back this up with an actual chemistry person. But I think that they're more volatile and more reactive in general to the environment. So they're more susceptible, or they tend to patina faster, just with normal wear.
Something I've noticed when you talk about that chrome tan baseball glove leather aging dramatically and changing and developing patina, I've noticed in my experience, veg tan leathers tend to have only been the things that I've worn that change. And when you bring up baseball glove, that's a really good example, and you've kind of changed my mind a little bit here. Why do you think it is that chrome tan leather is changing so much more than other chrome tan leathers that I've used before?
I'm not sure it has to do exactly with the leather. I think that you could put a lot of different leathers in that use case and you would get something similar. because it's a pretty intense. It's like an everyday, multiple hours a day, lots of inputs. There's this sand and heat, sunlight and oils from the hands and moisture maybe. So there's a lot of inputs to it. But I mean, it's a lighter. The traditional baseball glove is a lighter color. There's not a lot of, or any finish on it really. So there's no barrier in between the things that are coming from the outside to the leather. And that's not to say that something or a leather that has some finish on it, like a top coat or dyes or pigments, is not going to patina. It might be different. Instead of getting darker, if you've got something with pigments on it, for example, it might go the other way. It might get lighter, especially depending on the color, because some of those pigments and colors are just naturally more unstable in terms of their color fastness to sunlight, especially, and also their desire to sort of stay in place. I mean, some colors are just less color fast and are more prone to rubbing off just by the virtue of the structures of the dyes themselves or the colors.
What colors would those be in your experience?
Well, red, the red family, and then oranges and yellows are usually the ones that are most mobile. But I mean, it depends on, and that depends on a lot too, because there could be, if it's a really oily leather, then there's, kind of in effect a little bit of a barrier that can be created between the actual dyes or pigments. It more likely and the leather itself. So there's some steps you would need to take to make sure things stay in place. But that's maybe getting too far out of the realm of what we're talking about. But yeah, I think that sunlight's a big one. You can go into a shoe store and with Cordovan as an example, you can look at the shoes that are in the window. If they've been in the window for a while, they're not going to be the same color as the shoes that are in the back of the store. So
some people are actually trying to achieve that. There's a little bit of a phenomena called sun fading shell. Have you ever done that?
Not on purpose, but I have. Yeah, I've got some shoes that sat in windows and got really light over time.
Let's look at this from a different direction. What can I do, or what can you do at the tannery to prevent patina from happening?
Really heavy finish and a lot of pigment, which is kind of the same thing. So pigment is like paint, and dyes or stains are like clear coats of just color. So there's no solid particulate in there that's really influencing color, where pigments are like there's actual like flecks. Kind of think of it like it's like chunks, little mini chunks of things that are a certain color. So that's why they're covering up, because they're actually blocking what you can see, because they're forming a new layer instead of just changing the color. So that creates a barrier, and then those depending on the color just tend to be more robust, I guess, as a very general statement to things like sunlight. And then on top of that, you'd put like a clear top coat. You'd put something that's UV resistant, which you can do, and you'd put something that's got some water resistant properties to it maybe, and then something that's going to protect, like act like a varnish almost, and protect the color under it, and then the leather under that. And even something like that, you can still eventually get through. But I mean, the modern finishing techniques are pretty robust if you want them to be. I mean, think about like a leather car interior. I mean, that stays pretty much the same forever. At least, in an older car, you get like in the driver's seat in the corner, you start to get, it'll come off a little bit, and because that's where you're using there's so much wear on the leather in that spot.
Well, let's break down the car example. What's in the finish of that upholstery leather for car interiors that's making it last so long and stay that consistent? You probably just said it, but I mean, I imagine it's more than just a UV top coat.
This would be a really good question for someone at a
well, I mean, I'm kind of
dye
leading
supply company, but
I'm leading you towards binders, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are like cationic finish systems, which I can only really talk about by name. But like the binding that's happening is happening all the way back to, I think, even retinge at that point.
Really?
So you're setting it up to be more accepting of whatever you're going to put on top of it, and then you're doing something even before you put finish on it to make it want to hang on to whatever you're putting onto it, and then you build layers that sort of all work together.
It's called a finish system.
Right.
I didn't realize they were putting binders in the tannage, which makes sense actually if you want it to stay grabby.
We'll have to fact check this.
Yeah.
So put
I wouldn't be surprised.
asterisk next to this when you edit, but I think it's more of
We'll
like
call it phone a friend for Tanner. Phone a Tanner.
I think it's like a positive negative charge kind of thing.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I think it becomes really, it's gotten to be really technical.
When I bring up the concept of a binder, I was trying to lead you in that direction. I think a lot of people don't understand what we mean. But when I think about it, I think about like painting my home. You have to use a primer on the wall to make sure that your paint sticks to it. Is that the same in the leather finishing world?
Maybe there's some similarities there. I always thought a primer is like you've got something that's heavier and thicker. So you're giving yourself a canvas to work on in terms of color more, but maybe
I think it's both.
Is it both? And it's trying to make it smoother. And
I think the primers have a grabbiness to them. They're sticky.
I don't do a lot of painting.
We're not painters either?
No, we're not economists and we're not painters.
And what was astronomers was the other one?
We're also not astronomers.
You're dispelling a couple notions that I had in my mind. Because earlier you said by having a heavy pigment on the leather will reduce the amount of patina that can change and develop on that leather. But you also said a heavy finish will help. Can you help me, in my mind, separate the notion of pigment and paint from finish? You mentioned top coats. Is that what finish is in your mind?
I mean, finish is all of it. I mean, the pigments are finished too.
So when you said really heavy finish, what did that mean?
I was thinking in that moment, I was thinking what was going over top of the pigment, but really, like if you're rolling pigments on, like with a roller, or you're spraying them on, or you're brushing them on by hand. In some cases, I guess. I mean, that's all finishing, and then finishing is not just one step. You don't just take the leather and you smear something on. It's like, oh, that's finished. Like usually, there's like you said, there's
a finished system,
base coats, and then binders, and then top coats, and maybe a few other things in there depending on what you want the product to do and behave, how you want it to behave, and the color too. I mean, you can be adding color, a little bit of color all along if you need to be adjusting color as you go.
Well, how would you finish it? Let's spin it back to the patina conversation. How would you finish a piece of leather to accept the most patina possible and have the most ability to change?
You want the leather to be naked, I guess what we would say. So there's no, like almost no, there's nothing on top of it. I mean, that was in a stereotypical traditional sense. If you take a piece of tan or really light colored veg tan piece of leather that has nothing on top of it, that's
naked. Yeah.
Right. No finish on, no dye, no top coats, none of that stuff we just talked about. I think that leather is going to be the most, will patina the most rapidly just with normal wear. But even if you have that piece of leather and you put stuff on top of it, stuff meaning finish and dye and color, and it'll still patina because those things only last so long. I mean, they're susceptible to the patina process too.
Would you say baseball glove is a good example of a naked leather?
Our baseball glove, yeah, the way we make it.
So earlier you mentioned vegetable tan leather is a good type of leather. If you want patina, you want that leather to change and develop over time. And that's a weird word, veg tan. It's short for vegetable tannage. But what is veg tan leather?
Vegetable tanned leather just means leather that's been tanned using tree bark extracts to preserve the leather.
What's an extract?
An extract is just if you take the tree bark itself and then the part of the tree bark that you want is actually the tannin. So you're trying to, an extract would be less looking like wood and more looking like something that could be introduced into water that would dissolve, that you could then use, to impart its properties into a piece of leather, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of hard to.
Well, I was just looking at my coffee cup here. This liquid in my cup. Is this coffee extract?
I guess it's interesting concept. In the tannery, we would say that's coffee liquor.
Yeah.
And then the coffee grounds
would be the extract. Ah. But you're rendering them a slight amount before you would consider it. No. They come to you crystallized, right?
And yeah, crystals and powders, and then with water and
so the
time
crystals,
and steam.
This is so forked into a different conversation, but the crystals and powder are the extracts?
Yes.
And then when they're in liquid form, they're called liquors.
Correct.
Ah, that's what butt liquor comes from.
That's what butt liquor.
I'm right on it.
Yeah.
Some people don't know what I'm talking about. Shell cordovan is tanned with these tree bark extracts, and when they cook them down and render it, it turns into what they call the tannery's butt liquor, which is great for when you're giving tours at the tannery. People always giggle at the big vessels holding all that liquid. In an earlier episode, you mentioned to me that veg tan doesn't necessarily mean tree barks. And I'm bringing this up because I was editing the audio and I realized that you keyed onto something. Is it any organic material that you're using to tan? Is that what makes it a veg tan? So the example I'm thinking of is olive tanned. Would you consider olive tanned, which is leather that has been tanned with leaves? Would you consider that to be a veg tan leather?
That's tricky because it's such a new. I would. I think I would. I think that it's a pretty new idea, at least to us. So, but it's a non.
Yeah, break down the olive tanning really quick, and then
It's the same thing as a tree bark extract. You've got. I mean, it's kind of like a goo that is very astringent, and then those structures are going to go in and do the initial tanning of the leather.
so the olive extracts come to you as like more of like a paste. It's not powdered or anything like that.
You should take this out because I don't know that. I've never actually seen. I think it's. I've only ever seen it as like a super viscous solution.
Well,
But that's when they were like showing it to us at the show, so maybe they didn't want to show us a powder.
Well, let's leave this in the episode.
You can eat it. They have you taste it.
Did you taste it?
Mhm.
What does it taste like?
It's just crazy bitter.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's like eating a coffee bean then probably.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's like I think that they're like, here you can even eat it, and then they give you a mint like right after.
Oh wow.
Because it's you don't want the flavor in your mouth, but they're just saying like it's.
See, I thought you were hinting at in the other episode. I thought you were hinting at veg tan is not necessarily just tree barks, but maybe it is. I don't know. It's a new concept now with the olive.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, there are depending on how technical you want to get. I mean, there are non-chrome, non-veg leathers. I mean, you don't have to use just those. There's more than just those two ways to tan.
So as a marketer, at what point can I say my leather is vegetable tan?
I don't know. I don't think there's any hard and fast. I think that people say that leather is veg tan when it's not sometimes. And I mean, how do you?
Well, ethically, how can I say that? Like, I couldn't call that baseball glove leather that's full chrome. I couldn't call that veg and be correct and morally responsible to sell it that way.
Right.
Yeah, but so it's weird. Like, there's no like fine line of like, what does that mean? Maybe this is another one of those marketing spin words that's just come about. And it's such a stupid, like, why call it veg tan? Call it bark tanned, which I think they used to call it.
Timber tanned was a marketing term that we used to use in like the 30s or something. But
I like that more. It's better.
I can only speak because my experience is in our tannery. You think about something like Chromexcel, which is a very old traditional product, like 1910-ish or a little older, like around somewhere around there. So very, very traditional and not a lot has changed. That is a chrome tanned leather that gets a bit veg retanned. But if you think about it like if you were to hold it alongside a vegetable tanned leather, the only difference is really like the first 2 days. I mean, there's only 24 hours that's different, and that's the chrome change itself.
What are you talking about? Oh, in the tanning process, there's only
so it gets chrome tanned, but then we just treat it like a veg tan leather. It gets veg retanned, it gets hot stuffed, it gets aniline finished. It's all that stuff that you would associate with a vegetable tan piece of leather. So I mean, it depends. I mean, you can't call that vegetable tanned, but it's really close to what or almost identical to what you would do to a product in the vast majority of the process. And then the chrome content is 3% of the finished product, maybe somewhere around there.
Well, so I guess that's a good question: is why chrome tan at all? Why not make Chromexcel full veg or full chrome?
Well, full chrome is a completely different product because you're changing the retannage then. Then the retannage has no tree barks in it, and it's just a different product. I'm not sure I'm sure we've done it, but I'm not sure I've seen it or we've called it a name that I didn't associate with this sort of line of thought, but it would be softer, most likely, and stronger and more heat resistant. It would probably feel less round. So that meaning like when you flex the leather, it would have less sort of bounce and more or less
body
to it, I guess.
to be a little bit more drapey.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you do to it. It depends on the retainage too. I mean, that's very generally speaking, but
we're forked so deep here, Nick, because there's another deep fork.
Because I mean, I was going to say we have done a non-chrome version of Chromexcel, which we call XL.
Mm-hmm.
Very creative of us.
Yeah.
It's a really nice leather, but it's not the same at all.
What's the difference?
It doesn't have. I mean, it's not as strong or heat resistant because it doesn't have that chrome base, which is one of the things that chrome does, which is why it's become such a prevalent tanning method, because it's for manufacturing. It's beneficial, especially for shoes, because you can wet a piece of leather and then stretch it over last, and then you can put it through a dryer, and then you've got a shoe in a lot less time than you would if you were using a piece of cordovan. You did all that. You have to stretch it gently, and then the old school guys would say wood last and let it dry on the last to get the best result, which is a lot more time consuming. You need more time, you need more lasts. So there's a lot going on. It's nice. It's just different.